I'm standing and cheering for Canada. Hi, this is Chantal Kreviazik. It's not our way to boast, but Canadians are standing strong from coast to coast to coast to protect Canadian jobs and support Canadian businesses for this country that only us command. Shop as if your country depends on it. Keep your money in Canada for Canada.
What up, Mike? Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1663 of Toronto Mic'd, proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. Yes, We Are Open, an award-winning podcast hosted by FOTM Al Grego. Silverwax.ca. Use the promo code TorontoMike10 at checkout and save 10%. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. Building Toronto Skyline, a podcast and book from Nick Iones, sponsored by Fusion Corp Construction Management, Inc. And Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Joining me today, making his quarterly visit to Toronto Mic'd, it's Ed Keenan from the Toronto Star.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the Macho Man.
Yeah.
Woo. I was hoping I'd get some Macho Man here.
Well, last time I was here, I think one of the questions was like a request. So
Andrew Ward, I think it was. I even remember. He's like, give us some Macho Man. You're known for your Macho Man.
It's not that I do particularly good Macho Man Randy Savage so much as that I do it enthusiastically.
I think it's pretty good.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, just cream of the crop. Ed Keenan, cream of the crop. So I was watching this show, The Floor. It's like Rob Lowe hosted. It's a game show.
Okay.
But people are supposed to do these trivia things where one of them is an expert on the subject, but if you beat somebody in some situations, you inherit their subject. So this woman had wrestlers as her subject, and I think like her original subject was some English literature thing or something. So, but a picture of Macho Man Randy Savage came up, and he was totally in the middle of that, flexing like, oh, yeah, and she was like, Randy somebody, Randy something, Randy, that's Randy, and then she couldn't come up with it, so...
Oh, man. Yeah, Leaping Lanny Poffo was his brother, but you know this. I can't tell you anything. People forget that. Leaping Lanny, because he was Randy Poffo, and he was a minor league baseball, like he was a prospect. Right. I want to say for the Cardinals or something. And then when the baseball career didn't work out, he's a hell of a ball player, obviously, to get that deep, but then turned to wrestling.
But then, heck of a, like, professional wrestling legend.
And he's in Spider-Man.
Him and Miss Elizabeth.
Do you remember him in Spider-Man?
I do not remember him in Spider-Man.
Peter Parker fights that guy, just a wrestler.
Right.
That guy's played by Macho Man. He's not playing himself, but he's acting, Randy Poffo. So, Ed Keenan, I was thinking when you were coming over, like we have these as recurring quarterly calendar events.
Yeah.
And it's always the first Thursday every 3 months, every quarter. It's every 3 months. Right?
Yeah.
Every 3 months.
Every quarter, yeah.
The first Thursday of the month at 2 p.m. Like, this is just recurring. And every time you're coming over, I think your timing is impeccable. I think, man, Ed Keenan's timing is impeccable.
Going on.
But it's a recurring quarterly visit. But kudos to you for always having impeccable timing.
Well, also, though, kudos to you because you're the one who created the original calendar event that would recur every 3 months and somehow found the rhythm.
Give me the kudos.
The rhythm.
Give me the kudos. And we should also maybe thank Mark Weisblot, who, when he stopped visiting quarterly, I think he was doing monthly, he said, Keenan would be a good replacement. And I said, yeah, he would be a good replacement. And you've kind of taken on that role here in the TMU.
Well, there you go.
It's everybody. By the way, so Great Lakes was just here because we recorded a new episode of their podcast, Between Two Fermenters, and they left for you, just so you know. This is a hot pop.
Hot pop, yeah.
So no alcohol, but delicious.
I do like it. Yeah.
And that is here for you. And they also brought me a sunny side because tomorrow, April 4th, 2025, is sunny day in this fine province, and they're launching their delicious summer brew, which is called Sunnyside Session IPA. So I'm gonna.
So we should crack.
So I'm gonna do a countdown though.
Yeah.
You ready?
Okay.
3, 2, 1. Cheers to you. Here we are, survivors. Okay. I gotta say, no bullshit. My summer beer of choice is the Sunnyside because it's just so...
Do they do that every year?
Every year.
Okay.
So this is like the
And so
first...
they launch it for the season on the same date every year or whatever.
Well, that I
something
don't
like
know
that.
about. I don't know how organized they are, but for sure tomorrow, April 4th, is sunny day, and I've worked into my calendar a visit to the GLB HQ at 30 Queen Elizabeth Boulevard to drop by and hang out and celebrate sunny day.
Well, there you go. I mean, today is a sunny day. Thank goodness. Yesterday almost broke me, I think. That thunder snow. Yeah. It snows every year in April, but this year, I'll just be honest, like I have been having a hard time with the going outside the last few weeks. It's just like, I'm ready for something warmer and sunnier. I'm sick of the grind. So today is nice. It's a much better day.
Quite a swing, right?
Yeah.
Like literally at this time yesterday, it was snowing and slushy and garbage outside, blowing wind. And then 24 hours later, even here by the lake, it's shorts weather.
It's like, short sleeve shirt weather for sure.
Yeah.
And
I'm glad you wore your cut off jeans for me here, Ed. Thank you.
That's right. Break out the Daisy Dukes. Always the day before sunny day every year. That's my cue.
You said Daisy Duke, and I remember even buying it with my mom there was a byway at Jane and Annette. And at this byway, they had sheet sets, like we're matching like pillowcases and sheets, and then I don't know if there was a comforter or not. I can't remember. I think fitted sheet and then just a sheet, and then it all matched up. And I was a huge Dukes of Hazzard fan, and I wanted these Dukes of Hazzard sheets in this pillow set or whatever, pillowcase. And then I got it. So I get this, and you had two sides to the pillow. One side had Bo and Luke Duke, and the other side had Daisy Duke. I would only sleep on Daisy Duke.
So most of us had to make do with a poster over our bed. But no, I literally had Daisy Duke right in bed.
I was drooling on Daisy.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'll never forget
smoochy faces.
The other sheet set, just to shout this out real quick, I had two because man cannot live on one sheet set alone. And the other one from Byway that I would enjoy and I was lucky enough to have was Pac-Man sheets.
Oh, now there you go. And was there a Ms. Pac-Man on the pillow?
You know what? You know what? I think you cracked the code here. Okay.
Yeah.
So, Ed, how are you? I mean, it sounds like you're having trouble getting out. I actually surprised myself by setting a personal best for kilometers biked in the city and Mississauga in the month of March. In that I've never cleared 1,000 kilometers in any month of March in my life. And I had 1,005 kilometers cycled in March. So I've never been out of the house more, Ed Keenan.
Well,
I'm here to shame you.
Good for you. I don't think people talk about seasonal depression and whatnot, and I probably do get a little bit of the blues through the winter, and it probably is just related to sunshine or whatever. But the past month, I actually have just been feeling like down and unmotivated. Not sad, right? Not when I think of the word depressed, I think of a certain
you want spring
attitude,
to arrive.
but it's more like I feel like I've just been like in a bit of a fog. And it was like a week or two ago that I realized maybe this is related to the weather, because it was like I was like summoning up the ambition to like walk to the store, and that's a 10-minute walk away, and just thinking, would I feel differently about this walk if I didn't have to put on a toque and mitts and and then if it was sunnier,
if you could wear your Daisy Dukes,
and then I was like, that's it.
But also, Ed, I just
want the kind of weather that makes me feel good being outside.
I don't want to be your armchair, psychiatrist here. Okay, that's not my role here. But
new agenda for this week.
I think it would only make you human if you were grappling with what's happening in the zeitgeist.
In the world,
I was thinking, I need you. I'm going to look in your baby blues there. I need you because I know, and again, I'm biking up a storm, but I think that's how I deal with anxiety is I just bike more. Like, I think that's my coping mechanism, to be quite frank. But I don't feel, I feel like this mild anxiety with these threats from the country you were living in for a few years, the United States of America. And I was really glad to see you, and I said your timing was impeccable, because I really do, you covered Trump.
Yeah.
In fact, we should set the table by just remind us, who are you, Ed Keenan? I always forget. People might not know who Ed Keenan is.
I'm a writer for the Toronto Star. I'm currently a city columnist there. I also am one of the hosts of a podcast called This Matters. I was, for a time, the end of Donald Trump's last term and the beginning of Joe Biden's term as president, I was the Washington bureau chief for the Toronto Star. So I lived in Washington, D.C. I covered the all the highlights, the
insurrection.
I was going to build up to that, but yes, certainly
I'll fix it in post.
Yeah, like 2 impeachment trials, the largest mass protest movement in American history, and the insurrection at the Capitol. I was at the Capitol building, standing outside with the rioters during those events, and so it does. But I'm not sure what I'm going to say is going to reassure you. Like you're saying, I need to walk down off a ledge because I have a lot of anxiety. But I think it's justified anxiety. And the good news, I think, is that people across Canada have really woken up to that. Like all of a sudden, like a giant slap in the face. And the reaction of Canadians inspires a bit of hope. I wrote a parody when the first time the news came out that Donald Trump had made a joke, or people thought a joke about Canada as the 51st state.
Which I'll just say, last time you were over, which was the first week of 2025, we talked about that. So it was pre that.
So I wrote a parody column, like a set in the not too distant future where Canada was the 51st state. And, mostly for laughs, I kind of looked back from that imagined future and talked about how the world's longest undefended border lived up to its name, because when the Americans rolled over, they barely faced a fight at all, and all of that. I was making jokes and making a bit of a point, and part of the point then was that everybody always thinks he's joking at first, and then he never turns out to be joking. Right. But I might tackle that a little bit differently today, because the way Canadians are reacting, at least in the short term, shows that we have some fight in us. We have some sense of national pride. We're willing to go to the mat for this and not sort of sleepwalk into it. And I think that's a reason for some optimism. But I think, Donald Trump is showing that he's a full-on fascist with wants to wreak economic havoc on the entire world, not just us. And he has expansionist ambitions, and he's continues to cast his eyes our way. And there's not a lot of good news from that on that front.
All right, I'm looking in the eyes again because you have beautiful eyes. You know this, right?
They see well. They do what they're supposed to do for me.
Well, that's important. Okay, Mr. Keenan, you've covered this man. You're a journalist with the Toronto Star. If it should come to this, and this is the only way I think it could ever happen, would the commander-in-chief of the world's largest military have his military invade our sovereign nation?
I don't want to be too alarmist, and I think it's still a remote possibility that would happen. I don't think it's an impossibility, right? He's not saying right now that he plans any kind of military invasion. In fact, he said when he was asked about that specifically, he said, no, they would use economic force to take over Canada. And so I think he believes that. But Donald Trump goes from point A to point Z or Z, as Americans would say, very, very quickly, and in ways that all the reasonable, rational people constantly tell us not to worry about. It's. I mean, even just in the case of the insurrection, I was there on January 6th. And what happened is, like, when he had lost the election, he had spent the months leading up to the election saying they're going to try and steal it from me, and I'm not going to let them steal it, right? And lots of experts were saying he's laying the groundwork to try and dispute this election and stay in office even if he loses. But the American system has all these, it would never work. He's just trying to, like, it's a rhetorical ploy. And then after the election, he kept trying to postpone acknowledging the victory and all of that. And everybody, 2 days before January 6th, so January 4th that year, I was at a giant Trump rally in Rome, Georgia, like rural Georgia, where he was trying to whip up followers and saying, Mike Pence, I think he's going to do the right thing. He has to do the right thing or else. And I need all of you to stand with me. We're not going to let them steal this election. And he was basically saying out loud then, I'm not going to give up. We have to overturn this. And still there was a sense like, yeah, but what can he do, right? And then I think when he whipped his supporters into a frenzy to go attack the Capitol building 2 days later, everybody realized, this was never just rhetoric for him, and he's willing to do things that nobody would have guessed an American president would do or he would do. So he's openly talking about the possibility of invading Greenland and using military force to seize the Panama Canal. And so in that context, when he talks about making Canada a 51st state, again and again and again talks about it, and says he's planning to use economic force, but I don't think it's a big leap for him to then say, we have strategic interests we need to go and protect, right? Like, especially when we look at the North, which is vast and essentially undefended by Canada at this stage. And the Chinese and the Russians have their eyes on it. There are all kinds of pretexts you could imagine where an American president who wanted to kind of take over, demands a military presence there, works backwards, right? Like, there's a lot of scenarios I can see that I think we just need to be more alert to than we have been. But I don't think the tanks are going to roll over the border anytime in the next few months or anything.
I remember that quote. It was pretty early. No, we're going to use economic force. And at some point, he's going to clue into the fact that there is no economic force that would cause this country, this very unified nation. You alluded to it earlier, but I feel it, like this unification. Mm-hmm. I'm not so sure about Alberta. We'll get back to there. But very unified country. And at some point, he's going to clue into the fact that, it's almost like the Grinch couldn't steal Christmas. Like, they were still singing at the end of that.
Yeah.
The Grinch. You know what I mean? Like,
that's a perfect, Grinch who stole Christmas.
It's like, wait a minute. The tariffs are at 200, 500%, 1,000%, and they still want to stay Canadian?
Yeah, and I wrote a column. I think white guys of our age maybe see hockey as like too much Canadian metaphor in hockey, right? Maybe too often we go to
possibly.
But I think after the Four Nations
elbows
Cup,
up, for example.
Yeah. But I think after the Four Nations Cup, when Canada won, and was a slight underdog, like it wasn't like some David and Goliath story, but given Trump and all of that, it had taken on this bigger dimension. This is not 100%. Just a hockey game, not just a hockey series. It's a proxy war for the trade war that's launching and the potential real war of the future. And I think like every hockey fan, Canadian hockey fan, has this sense that it's the fallacy of fandom altogether, that like your yearning, your faith, your undivided attention and concentration, your wanting it so bad is going to help the team win. Right?
Sure.
And almost for sure, the American players want it just as much as the Canadian players. But the American public, by and large, it's only of passing interest to them, right? Like, they can hop on the bandwagon or whatever, but it's like not really like it means anything to them.
Right.
And so to us, it means so much. So it's so important. And I was thinking, and this is what I wrote in my column, is that when it comes to a hockey game, likely me and you sitting and screaming at our televisions and praying and wearing our lucky jersey and all of that had no effect on the outcome, right?
Of course, right.
But that stuff can have a dramatic effect when we get into the kind of conflict we're actually getting into. The fact that the Canadian people, like as Stephen Harper, right, a conservative, said, like, would be willing to like suffer impoverishment to fend this off. Right. I think Canadians are braced for that. They're hoping that it doesn't take that, but they're braced for that, and they're ready for that, and they're willing to go through it. Whereas I think the average American, to the extent that they're vaguely aware that among the battles Trump is picking, because they're big fish to fry right at home for them, but they're aware that the battles Trump is picking include an economic fight with Canada. I don't think they are braced to withstand any amount of suffering in the name of that fight. Like, most Americans don't want to take over Canada, first of all. And second of all, I think how much impoverishment are you willing to go through in support of Trump's war against Canada? I think the answer for most average Americans is none impoverishment, right? Like, not one little bit. And a trade war hurts everybody, right? So there's going to be pain for them too. So, I mean, I think if we're talking about an economic force, we're going to get often the worst of it, but we are prepared to take the worst of it in a way that they're not prepared to take any badness at all.
And listen, I will live in the shed before I will agree to be. And the other part of all of this that irks me is this 51st state rhetoric, because of course we would never be the 51st state, right? We would be, what's the designation Puerto Rico has?
Possession, a territory.
Right. That's what Canada would be, where they don't vote for president, right, in Puerto Rico.
They don't. And there is periodic talk about making Puerto Rico a state. But of course, the Republicans don't want that because they think it would be a Democrat state that would give them 2 more seats in the Senate.
Right. Right. And that's precisely what this landmass of almost 40 million people is not getting the same voting rights as California or Texas.
Well, I mean, who knows? It's hard to foresee. I mean, he talks about it as a 51st state. Now, Canadians would, if we were even to contemplate any scenario where we were peacefully joining, we would think of it as the 10 new states, not one new state, right? But there is, I mean, we'd be a state, even if we were put in as one state, we'd be the size of California, and Trump has talked about it as a state from the beginning. I think they'd have a hard time. It's possible.
But you just said the sentence, peaceably join the United States.
Right. And like I said,
my brain can't come up with a scenario. Like, there is no, like, it doesn't compute. Like, I think, and I'm a guy living in Toronto, and I understand that carries its own, I was born and raised here. I've only lived in one city. Later we should talk about this moment when you came to the door, and the MP for this riding is at my door when you arrive. Like, and he's there, and there's a little chat there. It's just we didn't even get to the fact that we're in an election cycle here. But there is no, I can't even compute a scenario where Canada peacefully joins in any way the United States of America. Peacefully.
Yeah, well, not from the position we're in right now, right? Not from the starting point we came in right now.
Like, if you got kids, we both combined, we have many, many, many children. We have families. Where is this impoverishment? What word am I going for there? But how desperate, like, economically have we been devastated, where we realize, okay, it's time to capitulate here and give up our sovereignty?
Yeah, well, that's the thing, is I don't see that scenario unfolding, right?
So you're saying my mild anxiety is well warranted, is what you're telling me?
Yeah, I think so.
And it shouldn't be mild. It sounds like I need to elevate it.
Yeah, or maybe you're already at just the right level of anxiety.
That's what I want to hear.
So,
did you hear the cold open off the top?
Yeah.
Because you mentioned the 4 nations. That's FOTM, Chantal Kreviazek. I've been airing, only from FOTMs though, these PSAs that I get from this group. They're called the Pro Bono Group. And they share these pro-Canada PSAs. In fact, aired one off the top of an episode. It had Colin Mockery and his wife, Deborah McGrath, who are FOTMs as well. That means Friends of Toronto Mike, if you're just kind of wandering by here. But that apparently got the attention of CNN. Are you aware that I was on CNN?
I was not aware of that.
Okay, so this is big news for you, Ed Keenan. Since you were last here, So since you were last year, I spoke with Audie Cornish on the CNN This Morning show, live from right here. That happened to talk about this. So you're the voice of Canada. Well,
you and Doug Ford.
Well, that's it. I've been looking. Who else is getting the call from Canada? And it's Doug Ford, it's Olivia Chow, and Toronto Mike.
Yeah. Well, as it should be, right? As it should be.
Yes, absolutely. Everything's right in the world. But your homework is to go to YouTube at some point and just put in the keywords CNN Toronto Mike and let me know how I did here. Because this is a few weeks ago, but since your last visit. But I'm telling you, the level I'm at is such that I could see it happening. And really, I don't know, since we both have children and families, all I'm thinking is, how do I get them somewhere safe so I can join the insurgency?
Yeah, it's weird that I had a conversation with my kids at dinner one day about whether would be a draft in Canada, which of my kids would likely be draft eligible, given the timing of it, whether or not I would enlist, which I almost certainly would if they would take my middle-aged ass.
Well, I actually am trying to get myself in tip-top condition for this insurgency.
That's why the number of kilometers on your bike in March. Ah, I see.
You do belong as a journalist at the country's highest circulated newspaper.
Where this...
But isn't it amazing? Because we've been doing this quarterly for years, and it's amazing we're now having these talks. Because I have two sets of kids, and there's an older set where I have these kind of conversations, and then the younger set where it's literally my role to keep them completely oblivious.
Right.
Like I feel it's like. Oh, what?
Don't worry about anything. Yeah.
Singing lessons and soccer and everything's amazing. So I have that chat with the almost 11-year-old and the recently turned, what is she now? 9-year-old. I have to keep track of this. And then the 23-year-old and 21-year-old, we're having these kind of conversations. And it's like I put on both father hats.
Right. Yeah. I got 3 teenagers now. So the youngest is still just graduating from grade 8. So, she's still got a foot in childhood, but it's not shelter them from the news because you can't at that age. Like she's aware of things going on in the world, and so we're having family conversations that are kind of interesting. But.
Yeah, I'm sure there's lots of these conversations happening across this country.
Well, I'll tell you, I went to, and I wrote about this too. So there's a bunch of groups now who've embraced the slogan "Elbows Up." And they're not all affiliated with each other. So there was a big Elbows Up Canada rally at Nathan Phillips Square. Right. But then there's another group, like a week later, had the Elbows Up Toronto meeting at the Metropolitan United Church.
Charlie Angus?
Charlie Angus was there. Yeah. And made a really fiery speech. John Sewell helped to organize it. And people who've been in Toronto for a long time, who've been politically aware for a long time, will remember back in the 1990s, John Sewell kind of led the anti-megacity fight, and he did it from a group that met weekly in the Metropolitan United Church, so in that same location, right? And I spoke to, for my Toronto Star podcast, I spoke to
David Crombie.
No, David Crombie was also there. Ken Greenberg, who's a former urban design director for the city of Toronto, and a genuinely on all kinds of Toronto projects, like a concerned citizen. But he moved to Canada as a young man as a draft resistor, right? So he was in college, he got drafted to fight in the Vietnam War, and moved to Toronto to make his new home instead of that. So actually came as essentially a refugee from the American government.
Bill King and many a great Canadian. Yeah.
But so he was one of the ones who initially founded it. He sent an email to a bunch of people and said, what can we do? Right? How can we get involved? How can we get organized? So before they even knew there was this Elbows Up Canada rally and group starting, they named their group Elbows Up Toronto, planned this meeting. And I have to say, going to the meeting itself, it was part rally. Right? And there's some value to just going to be among a group of people who will shout at the top of their lungs like, no way, right? Over my dead body? No.
Yeah.
But it's also like, and I'm interested to watch how this evolves, because their idea in John Sewell's sort of community organizing model is kind of that you get these people together and get inspired together. But then you also use that as a planning purpose for your further action. And then it will be like decentralized. So people will come to these meetings and speakers will talk about, this is what our government should be doing. Like, these are the policies we should be pursuing. And people in the crowd will say, and they'll say, you know, we need to organize letter writing campaigns. We need to, everybody here to call or organize a meeting with their member of provincial parliament and insist that the provincial government do X or Y or Z or consider it, right? But then they also like have suggestions for like, these are the kinds of things that you and I can do. You know, and whether that's buying local or watching local and supporting the cultural industries, or whether it's something else, right? Like, and I don't have a lot of equally obvious things, but like we can't take muskets and go to the border right now because there's no shooting war. But like, what can we do to play a role in this? And so people are supposed to be sharing ideas there, but they also share information. So then you get like little subgroups. Like, it's like a bunch of residents here will become like Elbows Up New Toronto, and you and your neighbors will be organizing the bottle drives to fundraise for the like whatever. And it's just like, I feel like in my circle of acquaintance, there's an almost really unified desire to be part of the resistance, right? To man the barricades.
Yes.
And not a lot beyond like canceling your Amazon subscription and looking at the Made in Canada labels on your groceries. Not a lot of other ideas of what exactly to do. Right. And so to the extent that these guys plan to meet every 2 weeks, I think, in that church and try to build up a movement out of it that's action-oriented, I'm interested to see what they come up with.
I was going to ask you about this because I, representing Toronto Mic'd, there was Banjo Duncan Fremlin, the, Elbows Up correspondent for Toronto Mic'd. In fact, out of this, so, Charlie Angus dropped by here since your last visit and just to talk about this very subject.
Yeah.
So it's funny.
It's something he's like in his semi-retirement back to music. This has become his full-time passion, is this very subject, right?
It's all interesting because he came over to talk about the music stuff, and then he announced he was not going to run in the next federal election. And we had a rapport because we hit it off, obviously, because he's a punk rock politician talking about Queen Street in the 80s. Like, he's made for Toronto Mike. And then I wrote him on an email on a Sunday, and this was all swirling around in my tiny, tiny little brain. And I'm like, Charlie, I need to talk about this. Sort of like how I need to talk about this with you right now. It's a good thing I have a forum to talk about all this shit.
Who needs a therapist?
Jesus. So I said, Charlie, and I know Charlie lives on James Bay. Like, he lives in Timmins or somewhere far away. Yeah. And I'm like, hey, I need to talk. This is a Sunday or something. I wrote him an email. Charlie, I need to talk about this. When could you visit the basement? He writes back 2 minutes later, how's tomorrow morning? Okay. I clear the track. Here comes Shaq. Okay. Here comes Charlie Angus. It turns out he was coming to town to be on the agenda with Steve Paikin. And I think, like many people are starting to do, they sort of drop by here first to work out their rap or whatever before they sit down with Paikin.
Right. It's like the pre-interview.
Yeah, work it out. And I had the cameras going, and there was some tremendous sound bites. Like, this hour has 22 minutes. Took something I put on YouTube of Charlie and I talking during that visit, and just aired it as part of this. They did a bit about Wayne Gretzky, and and they aired this. So there I am on this hour. This is before CNN. I'm on this hour is 22 minutes with Charlie Angus. Zero attribution. I know this hour is 22 minutes is a comedy program. It's not a news program. Don't you think, would it be so tough to put from Toronto Mike?
Well,
or
they're
something
stealing
like
your intellectual property and
Zero
using it for their own commercial purpose.
You know what the kicker is here, Mr. Toronto Star? I took this video. I recorded the video of me being on this hour's 22 minutes, and I uploaded it to my YouTube channel, and I got a copyright strike. Okay? So think about it. Because it belongs to CBC. They steal from me my YouTube channel. They air it nationally, which is nice. Zero attribution. And then when I upload that same clip to my YouTube, I'm stealing from the CBC.
Right.
What
So
do you think of that? Let's write about that at Toronto
Where's
Star.
the Toronto Mike team of lawyers?
You know what? Lauren Honickman and I had a long chat just yesterday, so don't worry. I got Lauren.
All right.
Lauren's. No, I let that one go, and then I said, "Well, CNN will attribute me fairly," and they did. So it's all fine and dandy there. But Charles, so yes, I'm very interested in these what's happening, because I did then write an email to John Sewell. And he said he was too busy to come on Toronto Mic'd. So I struck out. He's too busy to come on. He's in his 80s. I understand. So Banjo Dunk is working on David Crombie, actually, and we're going to see what we can do. But
You could do that.
I'm very interested in all
Ken
this.
Greenberg is also,
Okay.
he's possibly be keen to talk to you. When John Sewell first emailed me about that Elbows Up Toronto group to just say, we're having this meeting, this is what we're working on, he offered that Ken Greenberg and then a younger member of their steering committee who's like, they consciously, like a lot of these people are veterans of the wars in Toronto over the years, right? So David Crombie and John Sewell.
And Barbara
Ken
Hall is
Greenberg,
part of this too, right?
Barbara Hall, Kathleen Wynne, they're of a certain generation. And so I think they realized we need to, so they have some like youth members of their steering committee who are university student age, who are trying to, bring young people who've never been part of this kind of organizing, because they're, the pandemic, but beyond the pandemic, their whole sense of like being political and being active is an online world, right? So trying to bring them into it. So, but those were the people who John Sewell at the time was saying were available to talk about it.
So we'll see where all this goes, but I'm feeling, you mentioned it's in a lot of us to be a part of the resistance, and I'm feeling it. Like, I never thought I'd have these moments and these thoughts. And then I mentioned that Mike Richards was on, what day is it? Last week, I guess it was. I've lost track. No, it was earlier this week. I've lost track of everything, Ed Keenan. So earlier this week, Mike Richards comes by. He has a big announcement to make. That sounds familiar, I know, but we do it. And I'm telling him some of the thoughts, and he goes, "Oh, so you're a bomb shelter guy." And then I have this moment where he's saying, I don't think I'm a bomb shelter guy, right? But in this, I think it would be, and you kind of made me feel like I'm not as crazy as Mike Richards thinks I am, but you'd be I think it would be crazy to not take these threats seriously. From somebody you don't trust. And I was going to ask you, because you cover American politics so closely. We've always been told, I've been told this since grade school when you learn about the American political system. They kept telling me about these checks and balances, okay? You remember sitting in primary school, and then you get that lesson about how the American legislature, and you got your Supreme Court, and you got your Senate, your House, and then there's a president, and these checks and balances in place. Are these checks and balances going to hold up with a fascist wannabe dictator?
Well, and what you realize very quickly, watching Trump even in his first term, and then even more so now as they basically are dismantling large sections of the American government, civil service, and pushing as hard, as fast as they can against the judiciary, right? Like to defy judicial orders and to openly say, like the vice president will, or Elon Musk will, or the press secretary of the president of the United States will, who does that judge work for? Right.
Right.
Like we're the bosses. No unelected judge is going to tell us what we can and can't do. And it's like, well, that's actually the American system, is that unelected judge does get to tell you. Right. But you realize very quickly, and it's true in Canada too, how much of what we consider to be like, I mean broadly, all of us who grew up in the liberal West or whatever you want to call it, how much of it is enforced by the good faith of the people involved? So there is a constitutional convention that, the prime minister goes and asks the, governor general, I do not have the confidence of the House. Will you grant me an election? And the governor general has the option to either grant it or ask the opposition if they think they can form a government and all of that, right?
Right.
And yet if you have an entirely shameless actor in the prime minister's office, this is what the law says they should do. Constitutional convention, that's the law, right? But if they just don't do it, we don't have like a constitutional police force who goes out and puts handcuffs on them. We don't have and then you come to these, constitutional crises, which are should at that point the head general of the military step in to enforce a Supreme Court order against the elected head of state, in the case of the United States, right? And it's unclear, right? And depending on how we're viewing this crisis having emerged, we might say yes, but in other senses, we'd say that's like an illegal coup to have the military take over, right? The president, the commander-in-chief of the military. So should the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff say, "Sir, I'm relieving you of command," because so these are legitimate crises, and yet they're the only real world enforcement mechanism. The other enforcement mechanisms are the decency and sense of shame and care for the democratic integrity of the institutions of the people involved. And if we had a tiny mini version of this in Toronto under Rob Ford.
You sound like it's an echo.
Yeah.
I feel like we've had this talk because you covered Rob Ford's mayoral period
And
there
was a point where everybody was saying, can't this guy be fired? Right? And it's there's no mechanism for Toronto City Council to fire their own mayor.
Right.
It's just our longstanding expectation is that in these circumstances, somebody would do it. They would step down, right? They would,
of course.
And so it's the framers of the American Constitution did set up all these checks and balances, but they were assuming a certain minimal level of basic human decency among everybody who would ever be elected.
Right, because if you didn't have that, you would never win the Electoral College and be democratically elected, because the American people, you wouldn't have got even on the ballot, or at least not as one of the major two parties, if you lacked that decency.
And what we did see in Trump's first term, he got away with a lot more than he should have.
Mm-hmm.
He pushed aside the general rule of law more than you would have expected in advance. But he did encounter significant pushback, including from officials he had appointed. People who at the time did not appear to be Democratic sympathizers or even reasonable people, people like Bill Barr, the Attorney General, right? People like Mitt Romney, who had been the Republican candidate for president. There were Republicans and people Trump himself appointed who essentially at certain points were saying, "No, sir, this is you're going too far," right? They got to the point of members of his own party voting against him in impeachment proceedings and whatnot. And yet not enough to actually formally do it, but enough that he was held back by people he himself appointed in the first term. And it was exactly their commitment to the rule of law, their commitment to the idea of what the United States is supposed to be about, to the integrity of the entire system, and to doing ultimately, as partisan as they may have been, and as many compromises as they were willing to make along the way for partisan purposes, to draw a line in the sand and say, this is too far, right?
Right.
There were, he's carefully made sure there's none of those people left this time, right? And that's the really scary thing, because I thought the first time around was pretty scary, but some of the institutions of American government in the end held as protection against it, and just barely, with lots of holes in the dam and water shooting through, but it held up, and he had to leave.
I mean, for one example that always strikes me is Vice President Mike Pence actually certifying the results of the 2020. Now we have J.D. Vance, more of a single fan. I always mispronounce that word, but it's not. It's almost like Trump learned to surround himself with like-minded people and not have to worry about somebody doing the right thing.
Exactly. Yeah, and I mean, I think he was pretty open.
You
about
really
that,
don't
right?
want me to lose this anxiety.
His loyalty is loyalty to him personally.
Right.
Is the only quality that he thinks is valuable, and people who have gone out of their way, and this is why the talk about the election being stolen last time was useful as a litmus test, because people were willing to stand up and say, Donald Trump says the sky is green, therefore the sky is green, are demonstrating, like they are humiliating themselves in public in a way that demonstrates that their loyalty to him is more important to them than anything else, including their own dignity, right?
Right.
And so that's a qualifying characteristic for service in the Trump administration. And that's where we're at.
So when I asked you a few minutes ago about checks and balances, it sounds like these checks and balances aren't going to hold up this time.
We'll see. They still exist.
Because I have a dumb
and
question.
there are midterm elections that are coming up. There are, like, popular opinion.
Well, coming up, like, 18 months or something. He's done a lot in 100 days.
God.
We're 100 days into this
like
thing.
I said to my wife Rebecca the other day, because there was like something had come up and we were watching something, and I just like looked it up on my phone just to be double sure. I was like, the inauguration was just like less than 2.5 months ago, like just over 2 months ago.
Right.
Like this is like it feels like we've been living through it for years.
So, as my resident expert on the Constitution of the United States of America, may I ask you about these executive orders? So, in particularly, and again, nothing too deep because I know you're now covering Toronto, which we will get to in a moment. But these executive orders, he's always signing executive orders. And yesterday happens, like I said, your timing's impeccable because yesterday was that Liberation Day with all the tariffs and you had that chart and everything. And there's even tariffs on countries that only have penguins or something. Like there's and what's the French island off of Newfoundland?
Oh,
that place, which will come to me the name, it's a French name, and Milan, whatever it is, apparently has like a 99% tariff on it because apparently they don't import anything from the States, but they export like lobster and this formula, which is just like, I feel like they went into Google.
And they're like, oh, this trade imbalance.
Yeah, like this,
they don't
it
import
spit out
any
a
of our
99.
lobster.
Yeah, it spit out a 99% tariff on this Pierre and Milan. It'll come to me. Everyone knows what I'm talking about. But okay, so yesterday was all the tariffs. I'm seriously curious, he can do all that by signing an executive order? Like,
there are certain things he can do by signing an executive order. And there are certain things that he needs a legal pretext to do. So, for instance, the tariffs against Canada and Mexico that were initially announced were being justified that he can act in times of a crisis, an emergency, right? Especially a border emergency. He can act to secure the borders in an emergency by executive order without authorization from Congress.
Right.
So the fentanyl stuff was all a legal pretext to defend the fact that he can do this by executive order, that he doesn't need to go to Congress and get permission.
Because it's security of America's.
And so that's why every time anybody looked at this fentanyl thing and said, including many Americans, some of them even saying the quiet part out loud in his administration, like Canada's not a significant source of fentanyl into the United States. If anything, the flow goes the other way.
Right.
That there's no danger. Like the fentanyl crisis as a poisoning the people overdose crisis exists in both countries.
Right.
As a part of a larger opioid epidemic in both countries.
It's tragic. Yeah.
And yet nobody's really smuggling it into the US from here.
Right.
Right?
Right.
But they knew that.
Right.
And so you say, well, why go through this whole charade, right? Like, this is about economic force against Canada to first of all, subject us and make us their minions and then maybe make us the 51st state along the way. If that's what it's about, why not just say that? And Trump does kind of hint at it sometimes, but they need this legal fiction. Now, the other question, given what we were just talking about, is like,
lot of countries.
Legal for who? Because, like, well, if it comes to the courts, like, he could just defy them. He could just defy any order that came from, whether it's from an international court or whether it's from an American court, saying, you're not actually allowed to do this. You have to go get Congress to authorize it. But it's like one more obstacle and argument on the way there, right? Like, they say you can't do that by executive order. He says, oh, yes, we can because of this emergency. If you want to litigate that, I'll see you in court in a couple of years when the date comes up, right? And in the meantime, we're doing it. And that they're doing the same thing. It's not like Canada's special in this regard. They're doing the same thing in immigration. They're doing the same thing in all kinds of American laws, including just like firing tens of thousands of civil servants and setting down like disassembling entire government departments. They shut down the USAID, which is like massive foreign aid office, but also international develop office. This is huge. Like, people in Africa are going to die because of this, like, because it was shut down. They already are dying, right? And it's like disease prevention. It's nation building. It's democratic supports. It's like there's all kinds of things, right? So just kind of shutting it down overnight raised a question in the United States. Is like, can he even do that? Like, he's the head of the government, so he's the executive who like is in charge of hiring and firing and organizing and doing those departments. But there's also a law that says that like he has to spend money that's set aside by Congress. If Congress says this is the budget for foreign aid, the president doesn't have the authorization to say, yeah, well, we're not going to do that. Congress set that side of money that they allocated those funds. His job is to administer them, not to decide not to do it, right? And yet, so that is a legitimate argument in the United States about whether what he's doing is legal. But he's going to do it in the meantime, and maybe one day the Supreme Court's going to tell him he wasn't actually allowed to do that. And maybe he'll pay attention, or maybe he won't. But it's a lot harder to like undo this stuff later. Like how you hire back thousands of people, reopen offices that were closed, like it's a lot easier to work fast and break things. And then when people say you weren't supposed to break it, you say, oh, well, I guess. What are you going to do? Rebuild it from scratch? Like,
yeah, and in the meantime, those meals ain't on wheels. You know what I'm talking about?
No, exactly.
Jeez.
Exactly.
Okay, by the way, a fact check. It's Daniel Dale. No, it's not Daniel Dale. It's Hayref. Sorry. Saint Pierre in Miquelon. I hope I'm saying Miquelon correctly. I have grade 9
This
French.
is the French island
This
off
is
the
the
coast
French
of Newfoundland.
island off the coast of Newfoundland.
Massive lobster trade imbalance
It's
with
like
the United
$3 million
States.
of lobster goes to the States, and they don't actually import anything from the States. So this algorithm, this very simple math, which is like trade imbalance divided by whatever that little formula was. I saw on Reddit, they figured out the formula, and it's quite laughable, actually. But that's whatever it spit out is the tariff, and it spit out this 99%, I guess, because I guess they had a no 100. It's got to be a 90. And yeah, 99% tariffs on those lobsters coming from Saint Pierre in Miquelon. But at least there's human beings in that island here. Okay, so Ed Keenan, do you wish you were back covering the United States of America presidential politics, or are you glad you're here now where I think you belong, covering Toronto?
I may have given an answer like this to you at an earlier time, like during the election or something, but it's the truth, is that I seesaw back and forth between being sort of jealous of whoever is covering it. And at the Star, like, we don't have a full-time Washington bureau chief anymore, but still, like, sort of feeling like I have stuff to say, and there's things I'd like to witness. There's this is exciting, right? And in the journalism world, in the writing world in general, like, conflict makes good stories. Exciting stuff gets your heart pumping. It makes you feel like this is important, right? I am contributing to history here.
Right.
And I miss that. The truth is though, too, there are as many days or maybe more where something happens and I'm so glad I don't have to like get on a plane and go and cover it. Or I'm so glad that I don't have to try to unfurl the lies of it, or stand in the midst of a crowd of Trump supporters who are, doing horrible things and being horrible people right in front of me. It gets exhausting. And so, I do miss the rush and the sense of monument, like of being an eyewitness to history or a recorder of part of that history. I miss that some days. And I still have the latitude to write about this stuff sometimes for the Star in my column. But there are a lot of days, and I think where I'm so relieved that it's not my job to work late to do that, to have to cover that stuff. That there are other people whose job is to spend day and night paying attention to it and worrying about it, and contributing to that. I think, quite aside from that professional feeling,
Right.
My family and I have had a lot of conversations over the last couple of months about how glad we are we came back to Canada when we did, because just to be living here with my children feels like I'm in the right place at this moment.
Well, I'm glad you're back
We did
here,
enjoy living in the United States, and there was a lot to like about it. And
Sure.
like, for all that we've been talking about, and I am a proud Canadian, a fierce defender, the thing about like going down to cover the United States was that there were crazy political things happening, but I genuinely kind of love the United States. But I love it as a neighbor, right? Like I like American culture, and I think it's huge and problematic, and the United States as a country has been the evil empire, but also the hero of the story at different
Sure.
times. It's like the history is complicated, but like the culture and large parts of the United States are things that I genuinely love. And I genuinely feel like have contributed great things to my life. Like whether we're talking about, movies or literature or food or music or just they're wrestling with those complicated parts of their history and sometimes finding the right thing and sometimes not. But like as a neighbor, as a relative, like somebody sitting here experiencing it from afar, like I think there's a lot to like about the United States, but that's not the same as wanting to be subsumed in it. And I also think at a certain point, living there, witnessing its problems, and feeling like as much as I was there as a recorder of those things, an interpreter of them for Canadians, that there's a helplessness in that my family and I, these aren't our problems to solve. These aren't our battles to even join. We are outsiders here. We'll always be outsiders here. And our home is back in Toronto, right? And so now we're back home. And so there are days I miss the job, days I'm relieved I don't have to do the job, but a overriding sense that I'm in the right place in the world right now with my family.
So I'm looking at the clock. So I think this episode is going to be an hour on what's on our minds,
Right.
In our hearts, and that is a lot to do with what's happening south of the border. And I thought that was a very thoughtful answer, by the way. And then we're going to do an hour on more, hyper local things after I give you some cool swag for making the trip here. But
Excellent.
my last
While you
moment.
describe- okay, sorry, you go ahead.
So I'll say this, then you go, and then I'll do some things, and then. But I was going to say, not to be your, amateur psychiatrist again, but hearing you speak of the States, and I majored in history, and it's the American history that's fascinating. Like, so I totally get what you're saying, and these are. You lived there and you spoke very warmly, and you almost said the word ally. You called them like a relative, but
Yeah.
until very recently, we all looked at that big, powerful country to the south as our closest ally, our protector. Like, we didn't have to worry about being a strong military because our big buds would have our back, right? We've learned some valuable lessons along
that's
the way.
literally the defense strategy of Canada is going to be the Americans are going to stand beside us.
It really is. Like, if Russia messes up there, we knew that, America's not going to let that happen. Don't worry. So I think part of the reason this is striking such a nerve and angering and riling up us, I consider myself like a peaceful, peace and love, beatnik kind of guy. Like the fact that I'm ready to join some kind of insurgency and help protect the sovereignty of this nation. Like, I think it's because of how much it hurts for your closest ally to pick a fight for no reason and inventing reasons and trying to devastate, like literally trying to devastate you economically. And for you to say, I don't trust that this country won't resort to military might in order to get what this president clearly wants. Like the fact that this is actually happening from just like a human...
It's a sense of betrayal, right?
Of course, it's absolute betrayal. It's like, when Michael Corleone kisses Fredo, right?
Yeah.
You were my brother.
That's it. And that's exactly it. Like, they were our brother, and they were our big brother, right?
Okay.
So,
Right. So I think that speaks to why it hurts.
To close
and then you get your timeout. Yeah.
Is that I think, and we're starting to hear this from some of the candidates in the election, but I do think that like there is a hope, and it's not a completely unfounded hope, that in the short to medium term, we can right and repair this economic relationship somewhat, right? That Trump might back down from this tariff fever dream against Canada and the whole world.
But we won't trust him ever again.
We'll never be fooled again, right?
No,
we can never go back
again.
to that complacent sense of believing that no matter what happens, the United States will be on our side, because we have seen clear evidence that even when nothing happens,
right,
they can betray us overnight.
Yes, and you get a timeout here, and I would just echo that sentiment 100% and just say that it'll never be repaired to the way it was. And no matter what, we'll never think of the United States again the way we have our entire, we're 250-something-year-old guys here, the way we have our entire life. So let me share with the listenership that Mr. Ed Keenan, quarterly guest on Toronto Mike, love talking to him, as you can hear in the headphones there. I have for Ed a large lasagna from Palma Pasta, and I want to give my love. He's cheering from the other room. I want to give my love to Palma Pasta. They're going to feed us at TMLX 18, which is going to be June 26th at Great Lakes Brewery, which is 30 Queen Elizabeth Boulevard. So this event's from 6 to 9 p.m. I hope Ed can make it out. I'm going to definitely ping him before and see if he can make it out. People with the FOTMs would love to see Ed Keenan, but they're going to feed us. So thank you, thank you, Palma. Thank you, Great Lakes. And this is exciting news. Al Grego, who will be there at this event, he's hosting a great show for Moneris called Yes, We Are Open, and they are now dropping episodes from season 8. And in these episodes, Al Grego went to Saskatchewan. He went to Regina specifically, and he's bringing back these inspiring stories of small business owners. So we get to, here in Toronto, I realize I think I live in this Toronto bubble, Ed, and it's like,
right.
I've had to, Bruce Dobigan came over recently. Bruce Dobigan has been living in Calgary for years, and he thinks so differently about everything. It's like, I guess we're the same species in the same country, but it's like, that's why, you mentioned Alberta earlier. It's really, I speak Toronto, and I have to remind myself sometimes that the whole country is not Toronto. Like, this is a problem I have, and I've been working on it. So Bruce will tell me what he's thinking, and that he's not alone in that province. So I'm just glad that Al Grego gets out of the GTA, and he went to actually Saskatchewan and talked to people in Regina. And he sent over, Ed, I saw you using this at your 50th birthday party. Yeah. You got kids, right? I don't know if they all have one yet, but this is a wireless speaker from Moneris.
Boxan wireless speaker.
Boxan. So you are going to listen to season 8 of Yes, We Are Open. And of course, you already know this.
Turn on the Bluetooth. Oh, no, you do, though, actually.
You do. You do have to turn on the Bluetooth. But I don't know if you've got those, and they're great. But if they ever break, don't throw them in the garbage, because you go to recyclemyelectronics.ca, and you put in your postal code, and you can drop off these electronics, these cables, these devices to be properly recycled. So recyclemyelectronics.ca. And this is exciting, Ed. I'm glad you drove here today instead of taking the bike. I can't believe I said those words, but
well, the weather it is good cycling weather, but
it's beautiful out there. Do you enjoy driving a nice clean car? Do you like a nice clean car?
I do.
Okay.
I enjoy it more than I'm good at keeping it that way.
Well, I'm going to help you here, man. This is a huge help you're going to get here. Cleaning is only a hassle if you make it one, Ed. And that's how they feel at Silver Wax. Silver Wax, a proud Canadian company since 1999, by the way. They make it all in Quebec. They're proud to be Canadian, and that's key to me. And, Ridley Funeral Home is proud to be Canadian, and they only sell Canadian caskets. And Brad Jones from there knows I love that. But Silver Wax, they make pro-grade auto care and cleaning technology easy for everyone, even you, Ed Keenan. They have kits for beginners, experts, or professionals, everything you need. So the order for the listenership and you, Ed, is to go to silverwax.ca and use the promo code TorontoMike10, and you get 10% off your next order. But I have for you, this is exciting, because I looked it up. This is a really serious kit. I'm sending you home with the most robust cleaning kit for your car, courtesy of Silver Wax.
Holy cow.
It's happening. Like, this
That's
is not
new.
just, started April 1st. Brand new, Ed. You're getting Silver Wax, and everybody can save 10% right now at silverwax.ca with the promo code Toronto Mike 10.
After the long winter,
Salt.
my car needs some,
this
some
is
cleaning
I
up.
think this is why they said, hey,
This
could
is
we
the
be on
thing,
the
is
show
like
in
a
April?
spring cleaning happens because you've accumulated all your stuff and all of that. But it's also like when we're in the summer and we're going on road trips and stuff, we're often just like in the car as a family. But it's like a trip is an occasion where like you clean it up, you come back, you wash it up again. It's like the long tail of Toronto winters are kind of, for me, like in my home, in my car, in everything, kind of a like, let's just camp out and wait, right? Like I got a bunch of stuff in my garage I got to take, or in my porch I got to take out to the garage to store, but like the snow was too high and then it was too cold and then I was too lazy. So it's like, we're getting to that time. So
well, I think this is why they said, hey, can we join you and partner with you for April? Because they know us Torontonians, us Canadians, we're coming out of this winter. Our car needs some help, and this is the time right here.
Yeah.
Hey, so let's go hyper local for a minute here. I got some quick hits here, but one is, do we know who burned down that red canoe?
I do not know as of this time we're speaking. News may have broken about it while we were talking, but
sure.
And that was one that I just like. You're just like, who would do that? Why would you do that?
This is my question. Who would do that?
So, in some ways, what you hope was the case, like what you would hope is the case, first of all, and this should go without saying, but it doesn't. So I'll just say, it should not have happened. Given that it happened, I think the better case scenario is that it was like a bunch of drunk teenagers who started a little fire, for the reasons
maybe
drunk
they didn't
teenagers
know
start fire. They're either going to warm their
did.
hands on it or whatever, or they're going to, like, they just like to see stuff burn, but they didn't realize it was going to burn the whole thing right down.
Stupid teenagers is best case scenario.
And the worst case scenarios are that somebody intentionally did it because, like, they don't want us to have nice things. They don't want any beautiful symbol of like a neighborhood there to continue existing. It's just like so, yeah. But so the last I read, I think this morning I was looking in the story I had been reading was not updated or anything like that. And so it was like, the police are looking into it. They have not yet announced that they knew who did it or why or have any, speculation on that. But it is like, there's got to be security cameras and stuff out there. I mean, I hope we figure out who did it.
Yeah, this is fresh. This is only from this week, and I think it was Sean McAuliffe who I follow him on Blue Sky. You don't post much on Blue Sky, do you?
No, and I might get into it. I might get into it.
Right,
it's more like it's more like, you know what? Like, I think you and I have talked about this before. I used to be kind of like a Twitter power user. Like there was a certain point where like I live tweeted the birth of one of my children, right? Like I was like always on.
Sure.
And for various reasons over a period of years I was using it less and less often for personal reasons. And partly it's just like I was more engaged with my kids right in front of me, but partly the amount of toxic stuff that you see starts to wear on you, and I just thought I didn't need that to be as big a part of my life anymore.
Right.
And then X and Elon Musk changed Twitter to be a whole different scale of toxic.
A rage farm?
And so I just kind of like stopped.
Right.
But in doing that, in that process, like I got out of the habit.
Right.
And so when I first signed back up for Blue Sky, I was kind of like, oh, this is like the good old days.
It really
this
does
is like the
feel
cocktail party days
like the
of
good old
Twitter,
days.
right? Like where there's a big audience of people out there, some of whom I know and some of whom I don't, but who are engaged in an interesting conversation and sharing interesting observations or news or updates. And I thought I could get back into this. And I still think I could get back into it. But I haven't because I've just been busy with other stuff. And so I haven't gotten into the habit of like it being my homepage for the internet the way that Twitter once was.
Well, that's where I learned.
Sean McAuliffe
was... Sean. He posted about the red canoe, and it was, I don't know, a few mornings ago. I can't remember whether it was 2 days ago or whatnot. It was couple days ago maybe. And I gotta say, it was like, at first I'm like, oh, is this a joke? Like, and then someone else, of course, has, real time footage. I mean, I bike by that thing all the time on the Martin Goodman Trail, but it just seems so senseless, and I just wondered if we're gonna find out who the heck did it and why. But we'll stay tuned for updates in the Toronto Star.
Yeah,
that's what we'll do. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the Star has reporters that'll be updating that for sure.
Of course. Stay on that story. Now, another story that was interesting from this week, especially for guys our vintage, because you and I are similar vintage, and we don't know a Toronto without this giant tower. Right?
I just, as I was on my way here, filed a column on this very subject, and if I didn't screw it up phenomenally, it'll be published like tomorrow morning.
Okay, because it turned 50.
Yeah. Okay. 50 years of the CN Tower.
So
right?
I produce a show for a great sponsor of this show. His name is Nick Iones, and Nick Iones has a show called Building Toronto Skyline. Nick has Fusion Corp Construction Management Inc., and they develop condominium towers, etc. And he's always tracking skyscrapers and towers and different infrastructure like that. But we're going to talk to a gentleman from Ontario Erectors. I promise him I won't make any jokes when I talk about Ontario Erectors. But this guy, Jack, is going to be our special guest Friday morning. So the next episode of Building Toronto Skyline with Nick Iones is going to be all about the CN Tower, which turned 50. It's always been there.
Yeah. I mean, for as long as I can remember, it's always been there. And it's interesting because this is like I mentioned it in the column that I just wrote that is going to be published. But it's like, I remember in the 1980s and early 1990s when I was becoming old enough that I was aware of these things, that there were like sophisticated adults who thought it was like a tacky embarrassment, right? Who would make jokes about like the world's tallest freestanding phallic symbol, or it's this symbol of our world-class neediness, or
those hot takes.
That the best view of Toronto was from the CN Tower because it was the only place in Toronto you couldn't see the CN Tower, right?
Which is a good line.
And it's like, these are the people who would also explain to me why, like, jazz was real music and the pop music I was listening to was garbage and stuff like that. So it's like, whatever, snobbery. But it is like, that just kind of faded out because I think, like, at a certain point, it's like if you were living in Vancouver and complaining about the mountains. It's like, this is just a feature of the landscape. It's like the defining feature of the landscape. Yeah. It's just part of who we are. It's like, ask anyone in Canada to draw a picture of Toronto, and they start by drawing the CN Tower, right? It's
100%.
And not to spoil everything, but assuming most readers are not going to rush out to read this as soon as it's hot off the press. But like, should. I think part of the snobbery back then that I was aware of these adults having, these sophisticated adults, right? Like, was that like, there's nothing that seems more gauche to a certain type of person than striving, right? Right. Like naked ambition and striving. And I think part of what I get nostalgic about looking at the CN Tower now, if I reflect on it, like most days it's just a feature of the landscape. But when I sat to think about like, what it represents and what it means. And like, we CN as a company saw a need for a communication tower, and, they ran a company that did that stuff. But then they're like, right here in this abandoned part of Toronto, these old rail lands, we could build like, the tallest building in the world. It'll be not just a communications tower, but like a statement and a tourist attraction. And and then that becomes iconic. And it's like, I don't feel like we're doing that kind of striving anymore in Toronto. And I feel like maybe I miss it a bit. Maybe we could, like, when we're having like the fourth hour of debates at City Hall about whether we can open a public bathroom in the park because it's like, is it worth hiring the employee to do it? And it's like, well, maybe there was a certain neediness and like embarrassing neediness in our old world-class stuff. But maybe there was also like a sense of dressing for the job we wanted, right? Like the city we want to become is the kind of city that can do this stuff and will do this stuff and will have fun and weird and like world-beating attractions. I don't necessarily, it's not like I want us to go out and host the Olympics or do like soft shoe things for like to break world records for the point of them. But I do feel like some of that spirit of, we have been in a lot of ways like fulfilling our potential by becoming bigger and more diverse and a beacon for the world. And yet I feel like there's a lot of ways where we've lost that sense of ambition that the CN Tower embodies. And I'm nostalgic for that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, listen.
Every question you ask, I just turn into a rant.
No, actually, that's
so.
why you're here. And again, we're gonna hit the 2-hour mark. It's gonna be beautiful, honestly. But I'll just say that what I love, and again, I don't know any better. I literally have only lived in one city my entire life, which I don't know if that's sad, maybe that's pathetic, but at least it's this city, which is a pretty cool fucking city, right? But I love the fact that I can be in different corners of Toronto and I can still see that damn tower. Like it literally dominates the skyline to a point where there's so few spots where you can't see the damn thing.
No, I mean, and it was weird because where were we were skiing at Mount St. Louis. It was like my kids' school's ski trip, and every year I go as a parent supervisor. It's the best parent supervisor gig you could ever have.
That's a good gig
because you don't actually have to supervise the kids. There are like professional ski instructors there,
right?
So you just go skiing all day. But so I was skiing with my daughter, and two of her friends were on the lift, and they were debating because they were sure they could see the CN Tower over the horizon, and I was saying, like, that is almost certainly not the CN Tower. I think that's just like a radio antenna on the next hill over.
Right.
But they're so used to, like, being able to see it from everywhere.
Yeah. Everywhere.
That they're sure, even a 2-hour drive away, that must be it. Like, what?
No, it's, I'm not surprised there were, pundits and I don't know, that's the way I see it. Like these Dick Smythe type characters or whatever that might have been crapping on it back in the 70s. But as a guy who's like addicted to the waterfront trail and biking it from here in south Etobicoke to often to just like Cherry Beach there or whatever, and then back Sugar Beach at least and back, like it's just that sort of like you always know where you are because of the damn tower, and it's like you can't get lost in this city because of the damn tower. It's like it's just like this
well,
beacon.
And that's it's like for people who've lived there their whole lives, you say, how do you figure out where south is? And they will say, like, the lake. The lake is south.
The lake is south.
And but if that's not useful to people who don't know the city, right? Like
if you're
standing at the corner of Yonge and Bloor, it's like, well, where's the lake? That's I don't know, right? But if you say the CN Tower is almost always south, unless you can see the lake from where you are, right? Like if you
right.
Like for most of the city, first you have to figure out where south is. Find the CN Tower.
Right. If you're on the harbor front, maybe not, but 100%.
Right. But if you're on the harbor front, because you can see the lake.
You can see you're 100% right. I had a tourist. I was biking around downtown. A tourist came up to me and asked me, "Where's the aquarium?" And I just said, "You see that tall thing? It's like go there.
Yeah.
It's
like at the base of it.
It's at the base of it. Yeah. So." Happy birthday, CN Tower. Just glad you're
One
glad
more
you're still
CN
here.
Tower thing. One last little thing. I didn't
go.
go for decades, right? Because I went on school trips and with the Boy Scouts and stuff when I was a kid. And then I was like at the Sky Dome and stuff, but I never went up for years and years. And when we moved back from the U.S., my daughter wanted to go there because she had never been there that she could remember. So we went up and we ate in the restaurant there. But the
revolving
all these
restaurant.
years later, so two things. All these years later, the view from the CN Tower could still take your breath away. It is magnificent.
Yes.
It is worth the trip up there. It is, and just to see the city like that, especially at night, it's like, this is amazing. Mm-hmm. And secondly, the restaurant that's up there is like kind of fancy.
Yeah, I think so.
But it's like, I've eaten in some really nice restaurants, and it's not like remarkably great food. But what it is like, if you're going to spend the amount of money to ride up the elevator anyway, the multi-course tasting menu that they have, or like price fix menu that they have, is like only a little bit more and includes the elevator ride up. And so it's like actually a super deal.
Pro tip.
Compared to just going up the elevator.
This ties in brilliantly. Like we talked a little earlier about Blue Sky, which I'm enjoying, and I no longer post on the app formerly known as Twitter. And if anyone listens to the Mike Wilner visit, speaking of Toronto Star, Mike Wilner came by a couple of weeks ago, And after that episode, I posted my very last tweet. I guess I don't know what we call it now. It's funny because then later that night, I got the email from the CNN producer and said, "Would you come on tomorrow morning?" So, anyways, just it all happened. That was quite a day. Okay, but on Blue Sky, I said, "Hey, Ed Keenan's coming by. You have a question?" So the two things is one is Mish says, "Great guy, gave me good advice for writing. I'll have to tune in later." So Mish, you gave Mish some good advice. That's just like
and not knowing which Mish this might be among the Michelles and Michaels and
it's not Mishy me.
Mishy me, but well, that's heartening to hear.
And Walk of Life says he knows so much about the city, and I'd love to know where he visits when he has a rare day off. I feel like he knows a lot of hidden gems. So the CN Tower, not quite a hidden gem.
Not a hidden gem. And
it's a good segue.
This is an interesting question because then you feel like you're on the spot, right? Like,
and you don't want to
where are the hidden gems?
Give up a hidden gem because then the world, the million people who listen to this show in 2024, they're going to know about this hidden gem and it won't be a hidden gem anymore.
That's true.
So you have to be strategic.
I also feel like I need like some direction possibly from you of like, what are we looking for? Restaurants, like bars? Are we looking for like parks?
How about this? So if Ben Rayner were here, a former colleague of yours, he would talk about, although it's closed now, we'll get to Ontario Place in a moment. But he would talk about the beach at Ontario Place. What he would have told me about.
Yeah.
And him and his daughter going to that beach.
See, a lot of the things that occur to me right off the bat are not so much hidden gems. Like they're not obscure necessarily.
Right.
So much as that they're not as broadly appreciated as I think they should be. Like Bluffers Park, Bluffers Park Beach, and Bluffers Park itself at the foot of the Scarborough Bluffs is just like, I used to say in high school, because I was like trying to learn to be sophisticated.
Sure.
And I used to say it's like, because I lived in Scarborough and I was in that teenage disenchantment with suburban monotony, like a character in a John Hughes movie or something, right? And I'd sort of bought this ideology off the shelf. Although I do think there's some alienating things about suburban life, especially if you're a teenager without a car. But I also think like the zeitgeist of the time was to believe that should be alienating, right?
Right.
But so what I used to say though about Bluffers Park is it's like maybe the only part of Scarborough you would photograph for a postcard.
Yes.
Like you're standing there and it looks like you can't believe this exists in Toronto. Because it is the cliffs are gorgeous.
Absolutely.
I love jogging along the Humber River, which to me was a hidden gem because before I moved close to it, I was like an East End kid. And I just was like kind of unaware of the Humber. I knew
are you talking about like the Etienne Brule Park?
Yeah, like
it's beautiful.
In along there.
Beautiful.
And it's just gorgeous. I like skating at the Bentway.
Yeah.
Ice skating at the Bentway, which is like relatively new. And again, like not completely undersung. A lot of my favorite hidden gem, like I used to be a barfly, so I had a lot of hidden gem bars, and a lot of those have even closed in the meantime since I stopped drinking and stopped hanging out in bars. And a lot of my favorite hidden gem restaurants have closed. Like I was like always like I love diners, right? Like I love Greasy Spoon diners, and more of them have just like disappeared, including the Dundas Street Grill, which was like relatively big, but like great breakfast joint. Especially with a family, like because they had a parking lot.
I'll give you a pro tip. I hope I don't blow it, but because I also frequented the Dundas Street Grill and then was disappointed it was closing. And where we now go is the Olive, which is like North Queen and East Mall.
Right.
And it's similar geographically, but the family can eat there, and I don't have to take out a loan.
I was already a big fan of Real McCoy Burgers, which would have been one. But then when they closed and then there was a big outcry and they became sort of social media darlings when they reopened at Bellamy and Lawrence there. But it is like a great burger shop. Of course, Apache Burger, if you're a West End person, you know Apache Burger.
Sure.
But similar kind of feel of like an independent.
There's Jumbo Burgers in the Junction.
I do love Jumbo Burger. It's under new management the last couple of years, and they're still good, but they're no longer open as late at night as they used to.
I know. Shout out to my buddy
onion
Joe.
rings. If you go to Jumbo Burger, you get the onion rings. If you go to Tom's Dairy Freeze, you get soft serve ice cream.
Right.
If you go to the Dairy Freeze at Caledonia and St. Clair,
there's another one?
yeah, except it's not the same kind of place.
It's a different
It's
kind
not
of
an
place.
ice cream
Okay,
place.
'cause
They do have a soft serve ice cream, but it's not like at some point there was this branding of like a kind of burger and ice cream restaurant.
Yeah.
But I think they're independently owned enough that they're like
interesting.
radically different places from each other now.
Okay.
So at Caledonia and St. Clair, you get the steak sandwich, steak on a Kaiser.
Okay.
It's so good. It's the onion rings there are not worth it. Just get the fries.
Get the fries.
But
I'm writing this down.
yeah,
This is good stuff. And shout out to Mama Martino's right across the street from Tom's Dairy Freeze, which is which I like. Again, I'm a Palma Pasta man. You know this.
Yeah.
But
Mama
I have a lot of
Martinez
kids,
is super
okay?
comfortable too.
yeah, but and you don't have to get a loan. Like the fact that 6 of us can go to eat at a restaurant. And when you tap with your phone, there's a $250 limit. Do you know this? Right? And now I've become used to not bringing a real credit card, and then I rarely.
And then you go to these restaurants where all of a sudden dinner is costing.
It's like, I'm gonna Ben Murigi's gonna have to pick up this tab, but at Mama Martino's, it's still kind of economical, which is kind of rare. But I only eat at Palma Pasta usually. But okay, that was you over delivered on that answer, and because I'm gonna hit the 2-hour mark, I'm gonna move us on.
Are we
here.
already? Okay, we're not quite there yet, but you got more.
But because you know what we haven't talked about until I brought up the legendary FOTM Ben Rayner, and we're always thinking of the great Ben Rayner on this program, but he loves swimming at that Ontario place, which he can't do right now. They closed it down.
Yeah.
Did you know? No, I was kidding. We cover this so aggressively on Toronto Mic'd because I just had Ali Weinstein on this program, and she made a documentary about Ontario Place. So it aired on TVO. You can still watch it. It's called Another Tomorrow. I always screw up the name of this place, but I'll read this. The Ford government is looking at moving its Ontario Place parking lot north, according to emails and documents obtained by Global News. And it appears to be canvassing sites at Exhibition Place to build the garage. And I'm 100% certain you and I have talked about this very thing. Is there an Ontario Place update for us?
I don't have an update for you. Okay. But I mean, this is like, the thing is that I think, to me, the real scandal of this, like, hold on, like the day I'm trying to remember if I was jogging or cycling or if I was driving and I got out of my car because I was going to a Scepters game. But like the day they were clear cutting that forest, I went by and stopped and like saw it. Yeah. And I was like, I didn't cry, but I could have cried. Like I was feeling so profoundly disappointed.
Yeah.
And like this is just so unnecessary. And so whether I'll be happy if they don't spend $500 million or something on a parking garage, underground parking garage there, I guess, like wasting less money than that on a new parking garage there would be better than wasting that money.
Right.
I know Olivia Chow had offered like to help investigate sites at Ontario at Exhibition Place.
Right.
Although I don't know that I love the idea of knocking down the Better Living Center and putting a giant parking garage there but I mean, there's a limit to how nostalgic I'm going to get about the Better Living Center. It's not one of my more treasured buildings.
It was the name of a good Wiseblot blog back
yes,
in the
it sure
day.
was. It sure was.
Real heads know what I'm talking about.
But I don't have the latest scoop on that because for me, like that thermos spa is going to be built, right? And it's not a good place for it. It may well turn out to be a fun place to go with your family when it opens. It will never be what we should have done with that land. It's going to be under construction there for some time, and the entire time I'm going to like shake my head and grumble and be angry every time I go by.
It looks like a weight because it's all flat in dirt right now.
Yeah.
And you got your Sinosphere, and then it just looks like it's been like bombed out. It's we'll see what but again, I put this on Blue Sky because I Blue Sky Ed. I don't know if I mentioned that, but I posted that if Therme, and I'm saying that right, Therme?
I think so, yeah.
If Therme were an American company and not an Austrian company, I feel
we would
like
have the time now to,
Ford would possibly rip up this bad deal for this province. But it's an Austrian company.
Maybe we can encourage some Americans to buy the company and
Elon can buy it. Okay, there you go. Okay, now there's a great question on the live stream. not that I wasn't going to get to it, because of course, I subscribe. I love the Toronto Star, and I also love what Matt Elliott is up to. And
Yes.
I got this news from him, but I'm going to give credit on the live stream. Firstly, Jeremy Hopkin on the live stream says the real McCoy has Bare Naked Ladies, Lovers in a Dangerous Time fame as well. So in the video,
yes, absolutely,
right, okay.
yeah. So I mean, that's that Lovers in a Dangerous Time video has captured a lot of my Scarborough youth in it, including the real McCoy.
Well, that's everything I
like
know about
the old
Scarborough.
A&As on Eglinton, like Stephen Page and Ed Robertson and I were high school students in Scarborough at the same time. They are, I believe, a couple years older than me.
Did you know them in high school?
No, but I did meet Ed Robertson. So like I said, I think they were like a year or two. Like I could look it up.
Yeah, they get a couple years on you.
A couple years older than me. But I was at like some kind of like youth family retreat weekend camp that my mom took us to. And he was there as like the facilitator of some kind of like youth arts group. And he said at that, like at the campfire that night, there was like a bunch of teenagers hanging out. And he said, I'm in this band called Bare Naked Ladies at Woburn, with, it's just me and another guy. We're like a duo. I guess this is the origins of it, or this is how I remember it.
Tyler Stewart came over and explained.
He played like a couple songs, including Yoko Ono, and then another song that had like some kind of like Jeepers Shag, like there was like a Scooby-Doo reference in it, but that one never became, as far as I know, they never recorded it.
Okay.
But they were like funny, but also kind of so immediately me and my cousin Adam, who was there with me, and a couple of our other friends who were there, were always like talking about this Bare Naked Ladies, these Scarborough guys, and then they had this yellow cassette came out like probably a year later or something like that.
Page Productions.
And so we went and bought it. And so we're like early boosters of theirs. But the point, I didn't know them, but I did meet Ed Robertson while he was still a high school student before he was, before the Bare Naked Ladies were famous. And he identified himself as a Bare Naked Lady then. And that's where I first heard of the group. And so I felt like this custodial ownership of them from the very beginning while I was still in high school. But Lovers in a Dangerous Time, like such a tribute to being a teenager in Scarborough at that time, right? The late 80s, early 90s, early to mid 90s.
As you know, I grew up in, maybe you don't know, but I grew up the west end of this city.
Yeah.
So everything I learned about Scarborough is from that video. No, just kidding. But what I can't believe it happened, and we have to, and shout out to Bare Naked Ladies, pinch me. We got to pinch ourselves when we consider that Bare Naked Ladies wrote and performed a Billboard Hot 100 number one hit that closes with the line, Birchmount Stadium, home of the Robbie. Do you know this?
Yes.
Like, just take a moment. I'm going to sip my beer. Take a moment and just think about that.
It is a
like, that's
great
remarkable.
to have that immortalized for everybody. As somebody who used to like go tobogganing at Birchmount High School next to the stadium,
right,
home of the Robbie,
right.
Yeah, no, it's great.
So, and again, I caught up later. In fact, only when I started this podcast did I start to capture like Scarborough lore and history, and a lot of shout outs to Maestro Fresh West and some people who kind of caught me up to speed, right? And, Elbows Up, I think, took on another level when Mike Myers went on Saturday Night Live and made the gesture there, right?
Sure
but so there's some Scarborough talk here. But it's like Birchmount Stadium, home of the Robbie, in a number one Billboard Hot 100 song. And then it's like, wow, okay. So on the live stream, they're talking about this. I'm going to quote Matt Elliott, okay? Because I like the man. What's not to like, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you said this word a moment ago, Eglinton. With the Eglinton Crosstown LRT finally opening this September, I'm feeling some existential dread. Is that true that the Eglinton Crosstown LRT is opening this September?
Man, let's not count our LRTs before they're in service is the thing. So unless it's partly my job to keep on top of this stuff, but I'm always worried that there's been like some development in the last 24 hours that I haven't hip to yet.
Right.
But
You're forgiven.
As recently as I know, and certainly when Matt Elliott wrote those words, and when I wrote a column about it, about the same topic, like around the same time, this is sort of like confirmed to the Star by sources, but not formally announced or acknowledged by anybody at Metrolinx, right? Well, there was like a trail of breadcrumbs where the TTC was like, first of all, starting to put up signs. Like, there's the shuttle bus route. Like, they have signs that say that this is the shuttle bus for when the LRT is out of service.
Right.
And they're putting those signs up all around. And there's like, somebody sent me a picture inside one of the central LRT stations where you go in and it's underground, and you can see that the video screens in there are live playing ads right now. They're like video interactive advertising is on there. And the CTC had written into their budget staff to operate that line starting in June. So originally people were like, oh, it must be June. And then the TTC themselves and the people approving that budget were saying, guys, we don't have any information, but we need to budget for it at some point. Like, we need to include this in our budget. So we're saying June because it seems like as good a guess as any, right? And then since then, the Star's transit reporter, Andy Tagaki, has reported that he has heard from sources that September is now the planned opening date, but that hasn't been confirmed. And I think the reason they don't want to officially confirm it, because Ford and Metrolinx have been refusing to provide a date, saying only that they don't want to get anybody's hopes up. They don't want to. They've fooled us so many times that they don't want us to be fooled.
They're going to underpromise and overdeliver.
So when they are absolutely certain that they're 3 months out, that's when they'll announce it, right?
Right.
And those sources of Andy's have said essentially that if all goes according to plan now, it will be in September, but they're terrified to announce it in case they uncover some other problem, right? Like, they are regularly running like full service in there, like training runs and all of that. Like it's on, but there always remains the chance when we're talking about what's the largest infrastructure project in recent Canadian history, like in decades, certainly in Toronto, in decades and decades, is now gone so far over schedule and encounters so many problems that you always think, well, something could happen. But September is the unofficial date.
Well, you'll be back here in 3 months, so we'll get an update then. You come every quarter if people don't know that yet.
Will that put us into the window where they will have announced it officially or done one of those like, oopsie, nope, not going to be September.
Well, this is definitely one, we'll believe it when we see it kind of deal, because we've gone this far. It's interesting that the city, CN ever built this tower that was the tallest freestanding structure in the world for so long. I think until I know Dubai's got a big one now. But on that note, because I forgot to mention it before, now CN Tower. Wow, that was opened in 1975 because it's 50 years old. See, I can do that math. And I was opened in 1974.
There you go.
So I know exactly how this works. And I learned this from building Toronto Skyline with Nick Iones. I learned that your old stomping grounds, 1 Yonge Street, the tower that's being built at 1 Yonge Street is going to end up 345 meters tall, which, there are much bigger towers in the Middle East and in China, etc. But it's worth noting that the penthouse, which I think is like $30 million if you want to pick it up, I think it'll be the 105th floor if you want to live on the 105th floor. It's going to be the same level as the observation deck.
Lower observation deck at the CN Tower, So
that is interesting. That's happened. So I feel like you, as a tour star guy, you might want to pick up that penthouse. 30 mil. Not bad.
Well, maybe we could go in on it together.
Okay. 15 each?
Because the journalism business isn't what it used to be. So it's a bit of a financial lift for me. But, if you want to get in on it with that juicy podcast, filthy lucre.
Well, what I'll do is, because I'm having the big event on June 26th. By the way,
pass a hat there for our penthouse fund.
Last year, we had an event in late June at Great Lakes Brewery, TMLX 15. The listenership bought me a kayak.
Wow.
I think I told you this. Yeah, and I literally not right now. But when the water warms up a bit, I spent a lot. Every week I got out and explored. It's been amazing for me to be out there in my foldable kayak that goes in a backpack that I bike to the lake. It was amazing.
Do you know, have I talked on this show before? Like, kayak is like Olivia Chow's happy place, right?
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and in fact, I talked about this with her recently, is that like, so I read these, among the things that I like, I've read all of Michael Connelly's novels. He wrote the Lincoln Lawyer novels. Like they're like and then he has these detective procedurals about Harry Bosch, and like they're just really good crime fiction. Sure. Right? It's not great literature, but he's written these great characters and followed them over years and years and years of their lives, and it's all set in Los Angeles. But he has this most recent character named Renee Ballard, and she's a woman of like half Hawaiian descent who is an LAPD police officer. But as we first meet her in the first novel, she's homeless. Nobody knows that. She works the night shift, and every night at the end of her shift, she drives to the beach and goes surfing. She sets up a little tent on the beach, goes surfing to clear her head and de-stress, and then, pitches up her surfboard. She's got her dog tied up in front of the tent. She goes inside and sleeps, and that's where she lives when we meet it. And it's like, you can picture as a novelist, but like almost the film adaptation or the TV gimmick of like, it's like the Lincoln Lawyer whose office is his Lincoln car.
Right.
And it's like the detective who's like a surf bum by day, detective by night. And Olivia Chow, from what I can tell, actually, like at the end of a lot of shifts, year round, because she has a dry suit that she wears and she goes in the winter, but like year round, she has like her police detective escort, like who's her 24/7 body protection, like drive her out to locations like along the Toronto waterfront, and she kayaks out to the islands, kayaks around. Like it's like where after a hard day of mayoring, she's de-stressing. And it seemed to me equally like the kind of gimmick that a TV character would have.
Yeah.
Like the kind of scene you would see on a thing. But if you've got a kayak and you're getting into it too, maybe you could do a like entice her with a kayak episode where you guys like get the portable studio out on floaties and get out there in the water.
I'm always 3 steps ahead of you. Are you kidding me? I'm going to pitch this for sure because Olivia Chow needs to become an FOTM. But I always loved it, but I never even thought about kayaking the city.
Sorry,
but
that's just a wild diversion to Renee Ballard. But it is like a weird thing about the mayor that you think.
So she works hard, she plays hard, and kayaking's her and her coping mechanism there. Amazing. I will kayak with the mayor. Absolutely make this happen here. So I was. Yeah, so last June,
yes,
I was surprised with the kayak. Maybe this June, TMLX 18 at Great Lakes Brewery.
They'll crowdfund you up a penthouse at one
young penthouse. Not that I actually want to live on the 105th floor. Because I like to take stairs. My mom lives on the 3rd floor of a condo, and I've never been in that elevator. Like I like the stairs, and that's the 3rd floor.
Yeah, 105th floor is a bit harder of a
right. Who's got that kind of time, right, Ed? 105th floor. I mean, Mike won't take the elevators. 105th floor.
Well,
okay.
I was reading up on the CN Tower recently, and apparently, when they do those charity stair climbs every year,
my buddy Mark Carey does it.
Average time to get up to that lower deck, which is so at that same elevation, is about half an hour. But the fastest times are like 7 to 10 minutes.
Wow.
Like the fastest guy or the fastest person to ever do it was like 7 minutes and change. But like lots of every year the fastest person usually under 10 minutes. So if you build up your fitness, potentially you could be scrambling up to your
105th floor
penthouse in a matter of 10 minutes.
Oh man, my quads would be so hard.
Yeah.
Okay, so a couple of points here because we got like 20 minutes here. We're rocking and rolling here. Did you know since your last visit we had a provincial election?
I was vaguely aware that one had happened. Yeah, the results eerily similar to what would as if it
except
never
this
happened.
Riding because you're in the riding.
Right.
Lee Fairclough. I always butcher that name because Fairclough. Lee won, and we used to have a progressive conservative MPP.
That's right.
Now we have a liberal. But you're right; it was awfully similar, and it was a 3rd majority for Doug Ford.
Yeah.
So, Do you think?
Well, and he's like the first premier of Ontario to win a third consecutive majority since like Leslie Frost in the 50s, I think, or something like that.
Wow. Now, we were just kids, right, Ed? So
there have been like people who've won 3 consecutive terms, but not 3 consecutive majorities.
No, it's impressive, and it's clear because this ties in with the federal election cycle we're in right now. Because April 28, and then this is how we're going to close with all this stuff, which it's clear that Doug Ford is not going to help Pierre Poilievre and his Conservative Party.
Yeah, from what I can tell. Now,
I mean, it looks pretty clear.
You and I have talked pretty regularly over the years, and so it will be no surprise to anyone that I am not a guy with deep sources in Doug Ford. Like, sources close to Doug Ford are not talking to me.
Right.
Almost never.
Right.
So this is like from my colleagues and the other political people that I talk to regularly, the impression I get is that Doug Ford and Pierre Poilievre do not like each other at all. Like is an understatement, and had a frosty to non-existent relationship. Part of why Doug Ford wanted to go to the polls early was to beat the federal people there, because he thought if Pierre Poilievre won, that would be bad news for him in a number of ways, and all of that. But yeah, those behind the scenes tensions have certainly exploded into the forefront in the last couple weeks, haven't they? And
I mean, it doesn't take a Ed Keenan to connect dots that possibly, again, this is all just speculation and possibly stuff here. Pure speculation. Lauren Honickman wants me to say this is pure speculation on my part. So Pierre Poilievre, let's say on April 28th that he loses this election. Okay,
yeah, which he might not.
Yeah.
Right, there's a lot still to happen.
Oh yeah, we're all speculating here. So let's say he loses, which I think as recently as 3 months ago, we'll say. I don't think that was any. I think we all thought at least I'm going to speak for myself. I can't speak for anyone else. But 3 months ago, I thought it was a surety that the Conservative Party would form a majority government in 2025.
Smart political people were like not even qualifying their statements that when Pierre Poilievre is prime minister.
I had many a CBC person over, and I would talk to them. When Pierre Poilievre is prime minister, what are your concerns? He's defunding the CBC on day one. Which
I have like I think maybe I used to a long time ago. I think maybe I used to be too cocky about my ability to make political predictions.
Yeah, when you said Hillary was going to win, you said
I had already learned my lesson by then.
Good.
But even earlier than that, when when people thought Donald Trump, like, well, we want him to be the nominee because he'll never win, and I would just be like, be careful what you wish for, because like things don't go according to plans, right? Like, so like at some point, I became almost too protective, where like I couch everything in a like, well, maybe, like don't, and so, but yeah. People around me were certainly talking as if people who follow Ottawa politics for a living were certainly considering it a sure thing 3 months ago. And now nothing is sure. And if anything, it looks a lot more likely that he will lose than it did. And it looks like possibly if you were betting today that would be the safer bet would be that the Conservatives were not going to win.
Yeah, so this is, and I say this on CNN, so when you get to my CNN appearance, in this 4 minutes, I do talk about this greatest flip. I don't remember the terms I used. I was smarter on CNN than I'm on Toronto Mike. You know this, right? But the greatest turnaround I've ever witnessed in my life following politics.
Polling history in Canada, I think.
So this surety, and again, I actually had, it's one of those things where, levels, first you accept it, and then you go on. So it's like I was braced for the fact that it'll be Prime Minister Poilievre. I will declare, people listening should know I'm not a big fan of the man, but I'm not a journalist like Ed Keenan. I can have these opinions. Okay. So, although you're a columnist.
I'm a columnist, so I'm allowed to have opinions.
You're allowed to have opinions. You're paid to have opinions. Okay. So, what about, to get back to the Doug Ford thing? So Doug Ford just won 3 majorities provincially. I don't know how good his French is. I don't know how much it matters in 2025. But you know where I'm going with this. Pierre Poilievre, he loses. He would be ousted as, I think this. How'd you blow a 4-1 lead against the Bruins, right? So
well, and they did that to their last 2 leaders. Is like both of whom were kind of expected to win the elections they were running, and
Scheer and Aaron O'Toole.
Right. And both of them got turfed after one. The Conservatives are not have much of a history of letting people
Isn't
learn
it
on
an
the job here.
inevitability that Doug Ford becomes leader of the Conservative Party and runs to become prime minister of this country?
Don't think it's an inevitability, but I certainly think it's a possibility, and it's looking more like a possibility than it did, even a few months ago, never mind a few years ago, right? But I think like his long-term ambition was always used to be like that maybe he'll be prime minister someday. And Rob Ford would talk about that. Like I remember
his
mayor,
quote.
and Doug Ford's going to be the prime minister, right?
Right.
And like I think he grew up wanting that. And I think in that interim, like after he lost his run for mayor and everybody was waiting to see what he was going to do, there was a lot more speculation that he was going to run for the federal leadership. And then he got us all out to his book launch, where he said no, he's not going to, right? And then he ran for the provincial leadership. Like that was like this
Tim
kind of
Hudak was ousted because of a CTV story.
Patrick Brown, yeah.
Patrick Brown, right?
Yeah.
Yes, you're right.
Tim
That's why
Hudak
you're
had
here.
been ousted because
That's
of his failing campaign promise to fire everybody.
Right. Can't keep track of these.
Where he took a sure thing and shot himself in the foot.
Right. Which John Tory also did famously with the religious school.
But yeah, like then he swept in and took over. But he was, so my understanding, again, from talking to other people, not from me having sources with direct firsthand knowledge, is that he was taking French lessons after he became premier, earnestly trying to learn enough French. First of all, to like speak to the Francophones of Ontario, but also as a part of a potential.
Sure.
And I also, my understanding is like maybe he's abandoned that or semi-abandoned it. You don't hear much about it anymore. He doesn't seem to be trying really to speak French anymore. But, that question of how much it matters in 2025 is like, I think it does matter in Quebec, but it's not the only thing in the way that it used to, right? And I think like we're seeing so far, and maybe this will change during this election campaign, but like Mark Carney's French was advertised as like, he's fluent. And then he started speaking French in places where his French is far better than mine, but that he speaks kind of Ottawa French, which means...
Okay, well, I have
like,
French, and my daughter and my oldest, all my kids, but the older two are fluent in French. So they went to French immersion. And the accent is rough, but I have it on good authority from my sources that his French is actually pretty damn good.
Right, but according to Quebecois people I know and people who are... is that his French... He's when people talk about him speaking Ottawa French, they mean this is a level of bilingualism that's certifiable. He can communicate in both languages, and it is enough to do a job there. But that when you're in the cut and thrust, when you're thinking out loud in your second language, you become like very much more limited in what you can say. His ability on the fly to fully understand questions that he's being asked, and sophisticated questions, and follow all of that. It's like, so that's different than where I understand Doug Ford to be at. But at the same time, so far the people of Quebec seem to be, it's not that. If Polyev has much better French than him and others have much better French than him, that's not really their primary concern. Now, the last federal leader and now Stephen Harper, whose French got progressively better as he was prime minister and who made an effort to start every press conference by speaking French, but whose French was considered poor at the beginning, like when he was running. Right. He didn't dominate Quebec, but he did have seats in Quebec. He had whatever, and it did seem like he was given a pass for the effort by a lot of Francophones, right? And so, like, maybe there would be a bit of that. I don't know.
But no wonder.
But it does seem like the question I have for Doug Ford is like
Mark Carney
is like if he would really want the job, and it's like one thing that you always kind of dreamed of it, and maybe he would find that irresistible if there's a moment. But on the other hand, he just got elected to a 4-year term. He has a chance to be what he seems to have wanted to be here, which is like this generation's Bill Davis, right? Like a long-serving and popular Ontario premier who does leave significant legacy projects. And you and I have talked about in various ways, and I've written lots about where I would have chosen different legacy projects in a lot of cases, not all cases, like his transit subway plans are, I think, remarkable, right? Like, but it's like, then he could go to Ottawa and have to be Mark Carney's enemy, or like whatever. Like, maybe he'll be a success, maybe he'll be a failure, maybe it will finally be time. Like, maybe he'll fall on his face. Like, I don't know. Like, it does seem like a strong possibility. And certainly the people in Doug Ford world, like his most senior campaign advisors, out publicly bad-mouthing Pierre Poilievre, seem to be making a move to position themselves as like, we tried to tell them and they wouldn't listen, so now it's our turn, right?
Like, here's our internal polling. Look what we see in Ontario for support for Pierre Poilievre. It's quite obvious. It seems obvious to me that not only is Doug Ford not going to help Pierre Poilievre, but they're working against him and working for Mark Carney.
Does seem that way. And that's where the shift to then running to be the leader of the opposition would be jarring, is because he has made such a point in the last little while of being friends with Chrystia Freeland, being friendly with Mark Carney, staying out of this, keeping her powder dry. But yeah.
Do you have a predict? No, a lot of time to go. We're talking on April 3rd, and no one's going to hold you to this in your crystal ball. But do you have a prediction as to what's going to happen on April 28th?
Well, I think that a lot can still happen, and I think the last couple months has shown us that a lot probably will happen, right? And I think so much of what's currently happening in the polls is tied to Canadian reaction to Donald Trump.
Yes.
That Donald Trump can be, maybe, a significant player in the outcome. And he could do a lot in 1 month, right? In a sense, so I think the most likely outcome to me at this stage appears to be like the Liberals are going to win again, largely on the strength of this Canadian sentiment, that the pride and resistance to the United States that's risen up, and the sense that they think Mark Carney might be best to deal with that his resume and temperament qualify him for the job in a way that Pierre Poilievre's sort of like attack dog leader of the opposition resume doesn't. But I think Trump could, like when he announced those big worldwide tariffs yesterday, crashed the economy, implemented the auto tariffs on Canada and Mexico too, we were exempted somewhat from the retaliatory.
Yeah, we expected worse.
Yeah. If he sort of pulls back on us, if the sense among Canadians that this is less of an emergency, like, takes hold, that like we're still resistant, but we're not like worried that Armageddon is upon us, like maybe that will fade as the primary consideration. Also, I think Carney's resistance to turfing a candidate who called for people to like kidnap and turn over to Chinese authorities, a freedom fighter who he's facing, like I think there's political instincts here have not been shown to be flawless, and there's a chance, especially with two big debates, but also lots of big news items, that he fouls it up, that he ruins the impression of him as the competent leader. There's a chance that Pierre Poilievre convinces people that he's the Trump fighter, that he has a different gear to go through rather than just being the sort of like tear the government down attack dog, that he's shifted. So like lots can happen. But if I was forced to place a bet right now, I would probably bet on a Liberal majority to win more money. But I could also bet on just a Liberal win.
Yeah.
I think the odds of a Conservative majority look very slim.
Bruce Arthur. You friendly with Bruce?
I know, yeah.
He's also an FOTM. Okay. Bruce Arthur, just on Blue Sky, he wrote, truly incredible that today was the day Poilievre proposed a stern and good faith renegotiation of the USMCA agreement and an accompanying pause in tariffs. Like, so Bruce has been relentless, basically, in that Pierre Poilievre is struggling to, I would say, read the room, but read the country And his response here, and again, I have to check myself that this is I'm a Toronto guy. So where I'm sitting is it's gonna go red here, and most of the city will go red with a few spotters of orange. Okay?
Orange, yeah.
So Toronto's, I don't think a single riding.
We're not in a swing state. The 905 is is Canada's version of Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania, but Toronto is
no
Massachusetts,
blue.
baby.
No blue. I can make this stern prediction right now. No blue in the 416 on April 28th. But I just wondered if Pierre Poilievre has a comeback game in him in the next 3.5 weeks. Considering, and this is a line that I've heard from many a PR expert over the years, and I believe it to be true, which is you never let a good crisis go to waste. And there's a quote I wrote down because Mark Carney apparently said this today. If the United States, or maybe it was yesterday, but in the last 24 hours, if the United States no longer wants to lead, Canada will. And I think that sentence from somebody we see at the helm that we trust as we go against Trump in the United States here, that it's exactly what Canada wants to hear. Like, I feel like this is, and I feel Carney and the Liberal Party of Canada should send flowers to Donald J. Trump. That this gift that he's given that party when they were down and out, and then he make a leadership change, and now I think they're going to win a majority government on April 28th, that they can basically be at the helm, say things like that. If the United States no longer wants to lead, Canada will. And I think Canadians mostly, unless you're a diehard conservative voter and it doesn't really matter who's in charge, you're voting conservative because you hate the Liberals, whatever, you want to hear that. And I think that the Liberal Party is in a very good spot thanks to Donald Trump.
Another thing about that, though, and I think this is where Poilievre has a hard time. It's one thing for, like, they say, he should pivot to realize Trump is the enemy and all of that, right? But I also think that, like, with the Canadians having the sense that the country is under attack, they do want stuff like that. That sense of, like, if the United States is, and who Charlie Angus said at the speech at the Elbows Up Toronto thing, and he said something like if we have to be the defenders of democracy because the United States isn't going to, we'll be that because we've done that before.
Right.
We've been doing that all the way along, right? And so I think this sense that Canada could take a place of, like, leadership in the free world, not necessarily assumed to be leaders of the free world like the United States used to, but to be a leadership role in the free world. I think that's something that Canadians are hungry for. But I also think it's one of these times where our integration, you and I talked about how the relationship's ruptured in a way that makes you question whether it could ever be restored the same way. But I think that's where this sense of, like, our national institutions suddenly come to the forefront in a way they didn't. So, for example, like a big part of your campaign being, we're going to shut down the CBC, reads different all of a sudden.
And he's been quiet on that front ever since.
But as recently as this week, he's promising to preserve Radio-Canada, but he's also talking about, like, turning the CBC headquarters in Toronto into housing, right? And it's like, again, there's a read the room moment here, right? Where like Carney's coming out and saying, we're going to get back into the housing building business. Like, our government is going to unite us and we are going to do big things together because the moment calls for us having to do big things. And Pierre Poilievre's whole politics. So this isn't like just a failure to read the room. It's like his political mission has been to shrink government down, to slash away all the things that are not national security, policing, roads, right?
Right.
Again, might be out of touch with that moment. And maybe that's partly that I'm like a bleeding heart, like big government guy to begin with. And my criticisms of big government is often that they're not delivering what they promise they're going to deliver, that they don't get it done fast enough, that they don't do it effectively, right? But there's no question in my mind that a healthcare program, a dental care program, like government interventions in the housing market, like that, those are good things. So that's my political bias coming in. But it does seem like at a time where, like, can our federal government be the backstop that keeps Canada's economy going, props up the people, reunites us, gives us a new sense of mission, that it's hard to step up to that challenge if your entire political project has been, can we dismantle Canada's government, right? But that's the job he has, so we'll see, right?
Well, we will see, and this will be long in the rearview mirror by the next time you visit, Ed. But that 2 hours blew by.
Flew by. Time flies when you're talking Trump.
We didn't even talk about the Science Center. That's how busy.
Well, unfortunately, I have no new updates on the Science Center.
Okay, but there is, to bring it back to Toronto, and you can read more about Toronto. Go read the Toronto Star and read everything Ed Keenan has to write. He's a gem in this city. But that Gong guy is running for MP. The Gong. So, like, there's going to be thousands.
The biggest spending mayoral candidate. Yeah.
So there's going to be, whatever riding he's running is going to have thousands of Gong signs again.
Yeah.
So what's his deal? Are you looking into it?
We have looked into it. You know what? I have to go talk to the people we had looking into it and figure out exactly what that deal turned out to be.
I'm just glad the Gong guy isn't running in, what are we called here? Lakeshore, Etobicoke, whatever the heck this is called. But yeah, geez, Ed, you're great, man. Great
Thanks.
chat.
It's always so much fun to be here.
Don't leave without your lasagna, okay? I know your kids are hungry.
Not. My kids always are excited about podcast lasagna.
And that brings us to the end of our 1,663rd show. Go to torontomike.com for all your Toronto Mike needs. My wife didn't like the Google ads, and she asked me to remove them. And I said, they bring in a massive $250 a month, okay? And then she said, please kill them. And I did, because she said she didn't like she's a UX design person for a bank. And then I said, well, she knows, I had to make the experience better. So I got rid of the ads. So not only do I need a penthouse on June 26th at Great Lakes Brewery, but I need to replenish that money I'm losing from Google ads. But no more ads. No more Google ads.
Cool 250 smackers a month.
Much love to all who do make this possible. That is Great Lakes Brewery. Subscribe to Between Two Fermenters. Palma Pasta. Delicious. They'll feed us on June 26th. Maneris. Welcome back, Maneris. Season 8 of Yes, We Are Open is dropping now. Welcome Silver Wax. New sponsor alert. Go to silverwax.ca. They're Canadian-owned, Canadian-operated. And use the promo code TorontoMike10, 10, because you save 10% if you do that at silverwax.ca. And it helps the program that you love so much. RecycleMyElectronics.ca. We love the good people there. Building Toronto Skyline. I mentioned Nick Ianni's podcast is going to be all about the CN Tower next week. Next Friday, to be precise. And Ridley Funeral Home. Pillars of this community. See you all tomorrow when filmmaker Maria Marquina is dropping by with musician Harkness. She made a doc on Harkness. We'll learn all about it tomorrow. See you then.